Shena. Welcome, everyone, to the Aramaic School of Light. And tonight we're going to continue with what I've been doing on Genesis. This will wrap up the creation of, rather, the story of the Garden of Eden. It will wrap up this evening. And I'm going to open up with a short prayer and not the Lord's Prayer as I usually do, but with the one where I kind of include us all in the prayer. And it's an ancient scribal prayer, and I'm going to pray that right now. Al Haile Maran Ishwa Mishika Mishrenan Milap Milte the Maria Allaha. Amen. We're going to now continue with Genesis. There is a couple of things I want to say because tonight we're going to get into a particular verse that it's so unusual because this particular verse, the 16th verse of the 3rd chapter of Genesis, is so terribly misunderstood, and we've created dogma and doctrine out of this particular verse and put women in a position that the scripture was never meant to do. It's totally pulled out of its context, the whole verse itself. That's because the trouble with Semitic languages, notice I use the word trouble. The trouble with Semitic, especially Aramaic and Hebrew doesn't escape this either. Aramaic and Hebrew, the Semitic languages, Arabic has so developed into such a magnificent language, Arabic has, that it's so colorful. And whereas your ancient Hebrew and your ancient Aramaic, the semantic range is so wide. And what I mean by the semantic range is that one word can have so many subtle meanings to it. And when you just settle for one without getting the whole picture, you'll get a wrong idea. And this is what has happened with the 16th verse, which I will get to tonight, of the 3rd chapter about women and what God says to the woman. And she's supposed to represent then all the women that are going to come on the earth. And we have to remember that the Eden story is a story. No trees give you eternal life, and no trees give you cognitive understanding. It's talking about human beings. The 2 trees are about human beings, they are metaphors. One that relates to cognitive powers, and the other that relates to life that constantly renew itself. Now, the creatures that God created in Eden were mortal. They were not eternal. They had to keep eating of the tree of life, according to the story now, to keep that eternal life. Once they were put out of the garden or out of the park, the paradise park, once they were put out, then they no longer had access, which we're going to get to again tonight. I left you with the 3rd chapter about the 8th verse. But before I do, one thing I want to say about semantic ranges. I know we're coming on close to Holy Week now and Good Friday, which we call it Good Friday here in the West, but in the East it's called Suffering Friday because Jesus was crucified. So the words of Jesus on the cross. And Lamsa was criticized, Dr. Lamsa, who translated the entire Bible from Aramaic into English, he was criticized and still is to this day for his translation of Jesus' words on the cross, where he says, El, lama shwachtan. And those words in Aramaic, they have wide semantic variations. And this is why they only translate it one way. And they want you to understand that God forsook Jesus when he was on the cross and suffering. Can you imagine that? God abandoning Jesus? And everyone teaches that every Friday. And then they make up all these stories that God laid all of human sins. Jesus took all of human sins on him, that God couldn't look at Jesus and therefore forsook him. We make that all up. That's not biblical at all. But I didn't have an answer till I met Rabbi Lamza, Dr. George M. Lamza, who translated from Aramaic, and he's the first one to dare to give another semantic meaning to those words that are in the language. El, mana. Literally, mana means to what, not just why, but also to what. The L in the beginning of mana means to or for. So it can have the meaning of why, but it also can mean to what a particular thing, to do something. So the mana schwachten also has various meanings. And Lamza dared to say, my God, for this was I kept. He give us the meaning. In other words, you kept me to fulfill this destiny. Not, why have you forsaken me? He didn't feel forsaken by God at all. This is what I'm talking about, semantic ranges. It's the same thing we misunderstand John 3:16. We also misunderstand John 1:14 about only begotten. I mean, there's so many things that we miss because the ancient language had this wide semantic range. And that's what makes the difference. That's why the vocabulary wasn't very, very large. When I first met Dr. Lamza, he was telling me it was about only 500 word vocabulary. And then when I pinned him down on it, he said, well, not really. It had more than that. I said, but you got to consider the semantic range. Hebrew is no different. So you have the same problem with Hebrew, which I'm going to get into those verses tonight. All right, so let's continue now where I left off. One other thought, which I want to bring out, which I got questioned about it later about it, when I talked about that I translated the original word Adam as earthling, that God created an earthling. There's a reason I did that, because the name Adam comes from Adamah. Adamah. Adamah is what we say it. Adamah. And that word means from the earth, from the ground. I can translate it groundling or earthling, because it doesn't mean he created male first. It does not mean that, because the earthling was androgynous, a combination of two. This is what I wanted to make really clear in the last session that I had taught on this, but I still was asked something about it, so I'm going to make it a little clearer. He is androgynous. The moment God put him to sleep and removed from his side or rib, whichever one you want to use, I like the side meaning of his flesh and bone, not just the rib. But again, the rib meaning the support, what's the side of your being. That's why the word rib was used, but it's still symbolic. It's totally symbolic. It means that it is once the side was removed, then the earthling was no longer just an earthling. He's going to become man. Well, just like we say man, woman. Man, woman. Now, by removing the woman, he becomes man. Otherwise, he's just earthling, androgynous. Now he's differentiated. It's the differentiation is when the male comes into full view. In other words, there's never a male without a female. That's what it's saying. This is why in the first chapter it says he created humanity, male, female, made he them. And it's the same idea, but people don't get it when they're reading it. That the original man, again, the earthling, is androgynous. And the moment woman is created and built by God, coming from the flesh and bones of the earthling, then we have male. So there is no male without female. In other words, both at the same time, because the moment that creation was built, then, and that was taken from the male, taken from the earthling. See, I'm so used to the other way. Taking from the earthling, you got the distinction, the differentiation occurs. But notice how it sounds in English: man, woman. We're still saying man, but woman, man, woman. And the same thing in Hebrew, ish and isha. You have that, ish and isha. It's the same thing. So there is no male unless you have a female. Otherwise, you go back to the androgynous state. And the reason why I'm saying this is because when we get to the 16th verse of this third chapter, I'm going to explain something that most people don't get when they're reading it, and it's not even taught in so many of the commentaries that I'm reading. They still keep the old fogey idea about female, well, being subject to the male, and I'm going to explain all of that in the 16th verse. All right, I just gave you a little taste of what's coming. All right, the 8th verse is where I had left off, and in the third chapter. But just as a little bit going back, remember, it says that now when the woman saw, verse 6, this is where I had closed with, when the woman saw that the tree was good for eating and pleasurable to the eyes, and that the tree was delightful to look at, she took of its fruit and ate. She just went ahead and took it and ate. So she also gave some to her husband. Now, this is interesting because in Hebrew and in Aramaic, the word husband is used here because it hasn't been using that. But here it is. And there's no marriage, there's no wife, husband thing because there's no idea of a fully family yet. Not until we get to the 4th chapter of Genesis, which probably won't be teaching on that this time, but I'm going to finish up with the 3rd chapter. So it says here, then their eyes were open, both of them, their eyes were open, and they perceived, notice, perceived, this is all mind, mental, this is all mental work going on, that they were naked. Remember, their cognitive sense all of a sudden blossomed. This is all symbolic language. Symbolic language. All right. And we're going to get more. And then it's going to, the whole story is going to be symbolic from here out. And that's what I'm going to be explaining to you. And their eyes were open. They perceived that they were naked. So they fastened together fig leaves and made for themselves loincloths to cover their nakedness. And the fig leaves are large. And it's interesting because fig trees are more West Semitic than they are in the East area, in the Mesopotamian area. They're more West Semitic fig trees, but yet in the garden, in this garden park, they had the fig trees there. Then Then they heard the sound of God, Yahweh, who was walking in the garden paradise during sunset. He's coming to visit during sunset. This is so typical. All this is in Eastern custom. So the man, that's how I translate it now. So the man, notice I quit using earthling. So the man, because we have Ish and Isha, and because he is now man, he is now male, fully male. He is not fully male until the female. And that's what happened when he put him to sleep and created and built the woman. So the man and his wife hid themselves from before God, Yahweh, among the trees of the garden park. Among the trees, they were hiding themselves. Guilt had already started. Don't you see? They've already left Eden. When they were in Eden, I'm going to get to the meaning of Eden, the full meaning of Eden. The whole thing, even the idea of a park and a garden, is a symbol. And what is the park and the garden or the paradise here? What is it a symbol of? It is a symbol of humankind's relationship with God. That's what the garden is a symbol of. Your relationship with God. You got to get that. And now that the cognitive mind is awakened and what is good and what's not so good, that's why they covered themselves. Before they were naked, that was fine. Nothing wrong with it at all. But now, oh, no, we shouldn't see that. You shouldn't see this. You shouldn't see what's below. You shouldn't. We need to cover. Good and not so good. And they didn't know what to do, so they just got together these leaves and put them on themselves like a loincloth. And because something else opened in them. And this coincides with Eastern custom. Nudity, and we have it here in America too. Nudity, you hide nudity. In some countries, in Japan, oh, they don't have that. They have no sense of shame with that or whatsoever, or trying to cover it up. None of that. But they go swimming or bathing, or you take those special hot tubs that they have, and the men and the women go in there nude. It's again, this is custom, but here all of a sudden, why? And each custom depends on what you call good, and another place would be called not so good. Okay, this talking about the states of consciousness, states of consciousness. What put them out of the garden, out of the park, what put them out was their mental states. The mental states put us out of the park. And what was the major thing that put them out? What changed the consciousness? What opened? They disobeyed. They broke that common relationship with God that told them not to eat of the tree yet. It wasn't time for them to eat of the tree yet. This is a story. They're making up this story, the writers, showing that when we rebel against God, we lose the garden of our life. We lose the tree of life. And because we lose the garden, we don't think clearly. And this is what is happening here. So, let's continue with it. So they were hiding among the trees. Then God, Yahweh, called out to the man and said to him, Adam, here I use Adam, where are you? Now, can you imagine God not knowing where they were hiding. Adam, where are you? It's like your kids playing on you and they're hiding somewhere, and you say, where are you? And you have to go hunting them up. You can't take this literally, folks. God is omniscient and omnipresent. If he wasn't even omniscient and omnipresent, he would feel where they were. Ah, it's God is nothing but pure consciousness. So how can you hide from consciousness? You can't. You can't hide from consciousness. So Adam comes out and he replied when the voice said, "Where are you?" Now Adam's going to reply. He replied, "I heard your sound in the garden park, and I realized that I was naked, so I hid myself." Then God, Yahweh, asked him, "Who showed you that you were naked?" Notice he's carrying on the conversation with the man. Look here. Have you eaten of the tree I commanded you not to eat from it? I just love the way that's written. Look here. Have you eaten of the tree that I commanded you not to eat from it? I mean, he knew the minute he said, I hid myself because I found myself naked. You think God didn't know that he had eaten of the tree? But he's questioning him. It's like children eating chocolate and putting it all over their face, because of the way they're eating it, and then all of a sudden the parent says, "Have you been eating that chocolate and I told you not to?" And you got the chocolates all over the face. This is a story. God is acting like a human being, and the story's being portrayed like that. He's being portrayed as the way another human being would behave, especially a god. Hmm? So, but not the way we understand God. So he goes on. I just love it. I just love this story. It's just wonderful. So I love the response. He asked him, "Did he eat from the tree?" And I love his response. So the man said, "The woman." Typical, typical. The woman that you gave me. And I always love this because he gets the woman and gets God. I didn't ask for her. You're the one who took from my side and built her and gave her to me. I didn't ask. I didn't ask. You, the woman, and that you gave me. He gets both God and the woman. Uh, it, children the same way. Oh, so and so did it. So and so did. The woman you gave to be with me, she gave me from the trees, so I ate. Oh, I'm so innocent. It says who was with her in the verses above. Who was with her? He heard the whole conversation between the serpent and the woman, and he saw that she went ahead and ate. And then when she handed it to him, he took it. He said, "Well, she ate it. I'm going to eat it too." But he heard the whole conversation. He heard the clever way the shrewd serpent was speaking to Eve and playing on words. If you're reading it in Aramaic or in Hebrew, the play on words that's there. And then it kind of gets lost in English. It just isn't there as well. But it's there in the Aramaic and in the Hebrew. And so what it is here is he doesn't answer God. He said he didn't ask who was to blame. He said, "Did you eat of that tree?" And he said, "The woman who you gave to me, I wouldn't have that if I didn't have her. So I ate." I love that. She gave me from the tree, so I ate. So I loved the way it was, so I ate. And God Yahweh said to the woman, now he turns to the woman, what is this that you have done? The woman replied, now she's going to reply, what is this you have done? The woman replied, the serpent. The serpent misled me, so I ate. She wasn't misled by the serpent. That's why those verses above said she looked at the fruit, she examined it, and thought, yeah, you know what he was saying? Those fruits are good looking and they must be delicious. I'm going to try them. And she ate. Oh, it's just like children here. Now we're going to come to the consequences. What's misunderstood here? Okay, now God's going to turn to the serpent now. He turns to the serpent. Then God, Yahweh, said to the serpent, upon this that you have done, cursed are you. In other words, I'm putting a curse on you. From all the tame animals and from all the wild animals, I'm going to put a curse on you. For none of the other animals have it, but I'm going to do it to you. Why? Why? Well, not just because he talked to the man and the woman, and then the man followed. But you got to understand, in the ancient days, the serpent was worshipped as a god. Not here in this Genesis story. This is why this a curse is going to be put on it. You're nothing but another animal, and furthermore, you're not even going to be like the other animals. You're going to slither. That's why I said, and from all the wild animals, on your belly will you slither. Because in the ancient world, they put legs on this was the story. This is the story now. They believed that the serpent at one time had legs. So now the serpent's not going to have legs because he's going to slither. And you will slither. And this is my translation. And dirt will you eat all the days of your life. So the serpent didn't have eternal life. But why was the serpent worshipped? Because the serpent shed his skin. The serpent's able to renew its whole body. It sheds its skin and becomes beautiful. Sheds the old skin and puts on the new shiny skin. And so it was always symbol of rejuvenation, of change, of transformation. This is why later it became worshipped and all that. But what God's going to do now is change the whole picture. That is, the writer of the story is going to change the whole picture and show you now what the serpent really is. Nothing to be worshipped, not at all. So, and it says, on your belly will you crawl, you'll eat dirt, because you know how the serpent's tongue darts out when it's moving. So it's always tasting the ground, the dirt. And then in the 15th verse, and I will put hostility, not worship, hostility between you and the woman. In other words, all of her offspring, and between your descendants and her descendants. Snakes. We abhor snakes. And they will trample your head, and you will strike at the heel. Because, you know, that's where the serpent generally strikes, at the leg, at the heel. And that's all it's saying. But we built a doctrine on it. We have Christian doctrines built on this, that this is the coming of the Christ, and how the serpent got Jesus in the heel, and how he crushed its head. We built something here that's not there at all. And furthermore, the serpent never was connected with the devil until until the 1st century BC. That's when it got connected with the serpent. The serpent became a symbol of the devil, and it's in one of the books, the apocryphal books that I showed you in the class when I was teaching on returning to the original gospel of Jesus. And I brought all those books that I showed. Those of you who attended the class, I showed all those books. And in there, you see when it was first written in the 1st century, it's called one of the Wisdom of Solomon, is what it's called, where he's associated with the serpent. That's the first time ever mentioned, and not in the Bible, but in these other, what's called pseudepigraphas, in the pseudepigrapha set of all the writings that occurred for about 200 to 300 years, okay? And then 200 years before the New Testament, and then another 100 years where all these other writings came into being. It was not originally, so he's not connected with Satan. And this is why it's talking about the literal serpent. He's nothing but a crawling creature eating dust, nothing, and you are afraid of it, and it will strike at you, and you will crush its head, which we rule over serpents. Okay. Then I'm sorry. Now we're going. Now he finished with the serpent. He put a curse on the serpent. All right, and I explained why, and why on the belly, all that, because of the ancient stories that they have, that they thought the serpent actually walked at one time. Okay, now to the woman, he said. This is what's terribly misunderstood. I'm just going to read it, and then I'm going to explain it. He said, I will increase greatly. Now, I translate it differently here, but I'm going to tell you why when I read the whole verse. I will increase your toil. I've changed it. I used to have the word labor there. I changed it to toil. And your many pregnancies. And with anxiety, you will give birth to children. And toward your husband, you will turn. And he will, I looked for another word to use here to try and explain the full essence of the Hebrew here. It means in a sense of taking authority. It comes from that word shultana. Shultana, it's coming from that word sultan, but that it can also mean rule, but it means to have a certain amount of authority over you. Now, how that's interpreted is what has brought the problem. Remember, I told you about the wide semantic range of Hebrew as well as Aramaic, because the Aramaic and the Hebrew use the same word, pain. They use the word pain. That's what notice the one I translated, I will increase your toil, work, labor. I had the word labor there, but people are going to think, though, labor in the sense of laboring to have the child. That's why I had to change it there. No, it means you're going to, because what's happening now is you've changed the whole setting. You broke your relationship with God in the sense of disobedience, but God, didn't break with them. That's the difference. Their disobedience, God did not break with them. They broke with God, and that's why out of Eden they went. I'm going to get more into that as we go on. I have to go faster because I see the time is catching up with me. I said, okay, That word there in Hebrew, en, can mean toil. In fact, in the Latin Vulgate, the word toil is used. Why? Because Jerome, who made the Latin Vulgate in the 4th century AD, he he was noted for his understanding of Hebrew. So he realized that this didn't have the term toil here, didn't have anything to do with the idea of the pregnancy, in the sense that she would have household duties. She would have, sometimes she even went and worked out in the field, just like the man was having to do. We haven't gotten to the man yet, but that's what would happen. In other words, the whole idea of what a woman's role now is changing. In Eden, there was no concern about pregnancies. In Eden, there was no concern about toil. They had to work, they had to keep up the garden park clean and everything, but they didn't have to plant anything. They didn't have to dig in the soil. They didn't have to do any of that. They just made sure everything was watered, everything was blossoming. This is the whole idea. When you're in relationship with God, everything blossoms. When you use your own notions and ideas, you get into trouble. And this is the idea. And I'm not talking about church doctrine. I'm talking about your actual wonderful relationship with God, with love, with peace, with joy, with understanding, with enlightenment. Now we're talking about God with spirit. So this is what it's saying. Now a whole new form of life is coming, and obligations are coming upon the woman. This is not a curse. God is being used here to explain the role that women have gone through, that they've lost that relationship. And when this was written during the Iron Age. And during the Iron Age, that starts around 1200 BCE is when the Iron Age starts. And it goes to around 500. These are approximate dates, around 500. Before that was the Bronze Age. And so when the Iron Age starts, that's when when Israel, remember, this was written for Israel, even though it became known for all people, that at that time, Israel was constantly working the ground. They had taken over in the land of Canaan. They had taken over that and was working the ground. They were used to being a pastoral people, and now they became agrarians and digging in for agriculture and stuff like. They were digging the ground and thing, and this is why it's toil here. And the many pregnancies. Why many pregnancies? Because of the mortality of the birth rates. It was bad. It was very bad. And that's why there were constant pregnancies. And again, in the next word, and with pain you will give birth to children. No, 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 no. Having pain, giving birth to children has to do with our brain, because we have bigger brains than the animals do, and we feel more. And that's why the women suffer more. But God wasn't giving pain for having children. The meaning again here, the semantic meaning here is anxiety. It's almost a sense of fear because of maybe losing the child and giving birth. And she could lose her life too. It was dangerous to have children. And sometimes they were constantly suffering if they didn't have children. And if they had children, they were suffering with anxiety either way. So he said, you're going to have this. And the women in the agricultural time during Israel suffered a lot. They've lost their lives. And sometimes they had bad births and they lost their lives. Sometimes they lost a child. Even keeping children alive, babies alive, was really, really hard. If you go back and you have to search that out, and which I have, and you get all kinds of readings how they suffered and what they went through, and the birth rate and how bad. That's why it was many pregnancies. So you got to remember this has to do with with production. So the toil is also food production, household production, and that's the first one that's translated as pain. And it's the same thing in Hebrew. And then the many pregnancies and the anxiety, the pain again, the anxieties will give birth to children. And now, and it's still talking about this relationship between male and female. You're talking about Ish and Isha. You're talking about male and female. You're talking about the two genders here. You've got to keep it. So it's still dealing with and about the intimacy between the two genders. And toward your husband. Now in Hebrew it says desire, but there were other ancient Hebrew texts that didn't use the word desire. But you know what's interesting is that the word that's in Hebrew in the text, in the Masoretic text, tish, tish, it's tish, just like teshuvah. It's just like that word, only it's ka. It's with a kuf. Yeah, with a kuf rather than, I'm saying the letter in Hebrew, and rather than the beth, which became soft. So this is some think that a mistake may have been made, but it also can also mean that the ancient had the word to turn. And toward your husband you will turn. So whether you use the word desire or you use the word turn, and there are many, and most of the Greek Septuagint uses turn, the Latin uses turn, because they were using a Hebrew text that used the word turn. Return or turn to your husband. It's a play on words again, because when God talks to the man, we haven't gotten to it yet, but when God talks to the man and said what he's going to go through now for living outside of the garden, outside of the park, the man is going to return to the earth. He came from the earth and he's going to return to the earth. And since the woman came from the man because she was part of that androgynous, now she's going to always be turning to the man for the, and whether it's through desire or anything, she still has to turn to man. She has to, if she's going to have children. And that's what the rule is about here. It doesn't mean the man was supposed to rule over the woman over every single thing, over every single thing, that he was to be predominant and not her at all. No, male, female, them. And when you even read the story here, it says they were equal. But when it came to pregnancy, the man was to take precedent. Why? Because he had to deal with his life continuing through the children. And sometimes the women were reluctant, but she has to turn to the man and give in to the man. And during this time, this is during the Iron Age in Israel. And that's why the story reads like this. This is exactly why. And a lot of the people in the country were suffering that way. So, but here it's sanctioned. In other words, it's sanctioned here. Let your husband decide. He should decide that. Even though you may resist him, let him have his way. That's what the rule about here. The whole thing is about pregnancy and the human relationship. And keep it in its setting. And that's what we've done. We pulled it out of its setting and made man superior to woman because he's the rule over her. And the Middle East still does that to this day, resulting from this story. And it's not. Look at what they're doing. They won't let them get educated. They won't do this, that, and the other. They live in an ancient world that's gone. It's gone, and it had nothing to do with making women subversive to the man. It had to do with having children, and how difficult it was for the women during the Iron Age. Okay, you got it now? That's what this verse is about, and we made something else. In fact, we made so many cockamamie ideas on sex and everything from the Eden story. Not just on this 16, but on the other things there, making even original and creating a thing called original sin. Oh, I told you the first time sin is even mentioned, it's with Cain because he murdered his brother Havel. He murdered him. And that's when sin really came. This, what they did was disobedience. It was a terrible direct thing, and it opened up other things, which is a story to show that man, though he has human beings, though we have cognitive understanding and logic and all that, we need to keep our relationship with God, because otherwise we create trouble. Beautiful. Beautiful. This is a beautiful story, but how we misconstrued it, how we misinterpreted, and how we continue to misinterpret it. And God is not putting a curse on the man and woman. God is explaining what they are now facing once they leave the park. Let's go to the man. Then to the man, he said, because you listened to the voice of your wife, and you ate from the tree that I commanded you. In other words, he's comparing, you didn't listen to me, you listened to your wife. You didn't listen to the spiritual essence of your being, you listened to something else. And I commanded you, and I said that you will not eat from it. Cursed is the ground. He didn't curse the man. Cursed is the ground because of you. With heavy labor, you will eat of it all the days of your life, meaning now you have shortened your life, because you won't be eating of the tree of the life, from the tree of life anymore. You'll have no access to it. And thorns and thistles will it sprout for you. Yeah. You have to constantly clean the land, constantly do. Look at all the things we have done. We've even invented certain chemicals that even destroy our own body just to try to get bigger, fatter crops, instead of using the old-fashioned way, because it takes longer, and et cetera, et cetera. And now we've poisoned our bodies with all the chemicals and stuff we put in our food. And then what we do to our food, period. Okay, and then things we call food, which aren't food or nutritious at all. Okay. And thorns and thistles will sprout for you, and you will eat the herb of the field. Also, in the sweat of your face, you will eat food until you return to the earth. Remember, the woman's returning to the man, and now the man returns to the earth. Because from it you were taken. From it you were taken. Soil you are, and to soil you will return. Now this is parenthetical. This next verse is parenthetical. Now the man called the name of his wife Hawa. Hawa. In Hebrew, it's Abba, because the The B sound becomes a W or a V. Either way, Aramaic or Hebrew. And it means, it's coming from the word hayye, hayye, living, living, hayye, hawa, hava, Aramaic and Hebrew. Life giver or living. She was the mother of everyone who lives. That's why I make it parenthetical. So God Yahweh made garments of leather. You see, God did not forsake them. He made them leather clothes, skin, for the man and his woman, and clothed them. He clothed them better than just with the fig leaves. So God is acting as a tailor now. Remember all the roles that God played when he first made the earthling? He became a potter, and he took clay and made a clay creature, and then and now he's being a tailor and makes clothes for the man and the woman, because they're going to be put out of the park. Then God Yahweh said, look, the man has become like one of us, to perceive good and bad, or not so good. Now perhaps he will stretch out his hand and take from the tree of life, and will eat and will live forever. Therefore, God Yahweh sent him from the paradise park of Eden to work the ground from the place he was taken. Remember, before God created the earthling, he had formerly created the park, because he took the man and put him in the park. He had already done that before he made the earthling. So, according to the story, that's why I say formerly he had made the park, the garden, and put the man there. Now the man was going to have to work the ground from which he had come. So, from the place that he was taken. So God Yahweh expelled him and stationed east of the garden paradise of Eden a crow. That's how you say that in Aramaic. I put the Aramaic word in there. Crow, guardian, a guardian, which in the Near East you see pictures of these guardians. They have wings, and they stand with a spear. But in this case, it's not a spear, but he's standing there, a crowa, instead of cherubim, which is plural in Hebrew, but it's singular. They put it singular, one guard at the entry of the park on the east. It faced the east. The whole park and the entrance faced the east. So every time the sun rose up, that's where the light would come in through the park. Always eastward. So he had to put them out in the east. And a sharp pointed sword that turned every way to guard the path of the tree of life. And that's how I translated from Aramaic into English. And of course, there's a whole even more metaphysical meanings in here, but I try to give you a general run. Remember, keeping your relationship with God is what makes a park, a garden. Huh? And even when you are in pain, you're keeping your relationship with God. And now they are facing a whole new world. And we're introduced to the first family in the 4th chapter of Genesis, where we're introduced to the family. I don't know if I will teach on that or not, but we'll see. So I know you probably have questions, so I'm going to look and see what you have here for questions. I have just thought and wondered since the double helix or the DNA was not something mentioned that could the word bone or side, could also the word curve, if no, the word curve is not there. If that was possible, no, it actually means a full side, and it also uses the rib, both in Hebrew and in Aramaic, both languages was possible in the translation. That would really be interesting. That could be the DNA. That would be nice to work out. Try to work it out with us today, but I'm afraid it doesn't work. My degree is biology, and I just resonates with me. And we know man and woman both had the same amount of ribs. Yes, thank you. Then we have DNA, and that could be what makes it different from Adam, not trying to think out of the box, just thinking how great God is in all things. Yes, God is called Spirit 58 times in the Bible. I last read, yes. And Jesus cinches it all in the Gospel of John. For God is Spirit, and those who worship Him will worship Him in spirit and in truth. All right. Is there oh yeah, one other question. Because we are to go to the man was because we are to go to the man is birth control wrong. No, quit making this a doctrine. This had to do with the Iron Age. Keep it in its setting, please. Keep it in its setting. Had to do with the Iron Age, and and they're making a play on words. Man returns to the earth, the woman returns to the man. See, and it has to do, yes, with birth control. And the man understood the need, whereas women were afraid because they had the anxiety. I don't know, too many pregnancies. I could go, my children could go, and the whole thing would collapse. Women were responsible, so that's why it says that he will have the authority over it. Let him be responsible for that. Hmm? This is in the ancient world. We're talking about the ancient world. We're talking about the Iron Age, and in particular Israel and what they were in at that particular time. And so that's all that means. They didn't know it was going to be made the way we interpret this today. Okay? And make it that man should rule over women all the time. No. In fact, some men need the rule of women to help them in so many things that they're not seeing clearly. And that's how it was originally meant when it says that they were equal. They were to help each other. But that 16th verse has only to do with birthing and children and pregnancy and sexual intimacy. Okay? Keep it where it belongs. Okay. Now, oh, I think there's another question. You know, Rebecca's here listening with us too. If she wants to add something, Rebecca, do you have something to add here? I'm going to get to this last question. I heard you say God, Yahweh. Was God considered Yahweh at that time? Yes. That's how come we know it's at a later date. Hmm? This is a comment on trying to explain the spiritual true story of creation, and this is a commentary and explanation of how they thought it came about. You got it? Okay. And that's why the name of God is used. Whereas in the first chapter, there's no name of God. It just says God. It means the universal, self-existent. That's the first chapter. In the Eden story, we get a name of the God, Yahweh. So you have a different influence here. Okay. All right. So, Rebecca, are you there? Rebecca?
I am here, Robbie.
Okay. Do you have anything to add before we close?
I don't have anything to add, but I will certainly look forward to being here next week.
All right. In other words, Rebecca is going to take next Wednesday. You all heard her last week. And thank you. I know you loved her. We all loved her. And I appreciate Rebecca so much. She's going to take next Wednesday again. And don't worry, Hanny is still there. He's still coming on. He's going to be on the 16th of April. Hanny will be speaking on the 16th of April. I'm trying to make it easier for him, and he's so grateful to Rebecca also. And we appreciate it. So, Rebecca, you'll be speaking next Wednesday. We're
Looking
all
forward
looking
to it.
forward. We're looking forward to hearing you. Okay. Love you, everyone. Thank you. And we'll see you next week.